Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to the process and strategies for transforming apartment buildings to thriving communities. I am your host, John Brackett, and welcome to the show. All right, hey folks, welcome to another great episode of We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to taking average apartments and turning them into amazing communities. And of course, improving how people live along the way. So I have here another great guest. His name is Greg Gaudet. Very interesting story. Here's someone that's operating a business out of Maui. And of course, one of my old stomping grounds, the islands of Hawaii. So I'm very excited to speak with Greg and see what he's doing out there and how he's doing it. Should be a great show. Let me introduce you to Greg so that you guys have a feel for his background. Greg, I'm going to invite our audience into this conversation by introducing you. So Greg was the son of a prominent real estate developer. And as a son of a prominent real estate developer, Greg, you were destined for greatness, man. Your dad passed away from cancer, and my dad did too. So I want to speak with you about that because that impacted me greatly. My dad passed from cancer when I was, 20 years old. And in this case, you were 14. And so that had some impacts on you, including homelessness, right? Some jail, which we'll talk about. You OD'd on drugs as well. And man, you're a rowdy kid, sounds very similar to me when I was younger. So you were able to overcome those challenges, and that's what life is all about, right? Not where we start, but rather where we finish. So I'm really eager to talk to you about that, how you overcame something that traumatic, especially as a young man, your father being your role model, as was mine, and then now you have this void, right? But you were able to pivot, okay, take that negative energy, convert it into something amazingly positive, and then your vehicle for doing that, Greg, was, of course, real estate. You got into Section 8 housing to help other families, and it really gave you a vehicle through which you could help other families that were going through challenges, maybe not identical to what you were going through, but challenges, right? And that gave you a vehicle through which you can help other families and put them in positions to change their life as well. So, Greg, welcome to the show, man. Now you're in Maui. Very excited to have this conversation with you. Welcome to the show, bud.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So let's unpack some of this stuff. All right. So I have a pretty good sense for some of the things that you're going through because, like you, my dad passed to cancer when I was young. Fortunately, I was very, very independent. So that helped me a lot. So share with us your story because there's a lot there, man, that I know can really help a lot of people. So go ahead and share your story, man. I think, you're going to be able to help a lot of people through not only your story, but I think more importantly, how you overcame those challenges, right? And concentrated that energy. So please share, man.
Absolutely. I mean, now, first off, I could go on for endless hours and hours if I'm getting into all the details, but I mean, you covered a lot of it. Really, I had a really picture perfect childhood upbringing, white picket fence. My parents always had new cars. My dad would have, we never wanted or needed. And I had a very close family, and that was all turned upside down when my dad died when I was 14 years old. He was 54 years old. And my response was just to get into any kind of trouble I possibly could. Like you said, I had that void. I sought out drugs as a way to kind of numb the pain. Right. I ended up being addicted to painkillers primarily, and I think there's kind of a synergy there with the symbolic that they're painkillers, and I was taking them to numb my emotional pain.
Sure. That
I didn't know how to deal with. Of
course.
And that went on for a long time. In my 20s, I got arrested a bunch of times a lot of times for little things, spent a night in jail, and started going to rehabs in my early 20s. and started making progress, but also would relapse and then get worse. Ultimately led me to using needles, and finally in the end to using heroin, something I never could have imagined doing, or, that person being me. And
Right.
now all of a sudden, like, I became that person. I mentioned being homeless. I didn't see myself as being a homeless heroin addict, but in the end, the last treatment center that I went to, they were asking my address, and I said, well, when I need a place to sleep, I just drive down to my mom's house and sleep there. And they're like, well, what is your address? And I said, well, a lot of times I sleep in my car or like a friend's house or something. And they're like, so you're homeless? And I was like, no, I'm not homeless. I mean, I just go sleep in my mom's house, right? And they're like, no, that's homeless. That was kind of an eye-opening experience, or a message for me. Ultimately, I never did hard time or anything like that, but I did spend a few weeks in jail, and that was a really low point in my life. Actually, I will, just in case there's anybody listening that can relate to this kind of thing. I had certainly a lot of times.
There are thousands out there. The issue is most people are unwilling to talk about this stuff, right? Which is why, man, I have a lot of appreciation for you, because and respect as well, because most people simply are unwilling to talk about the challenging things. And when you're not willing to deal with the truth, man, you can't move beyond it, right? So I really appreciate you for that. So you got to trust me when I tell you this. There are thousands of people that are going to resonate with this message. So keep going, man.
Yeah. So I, throughout this time, I had, like I said, bouts with recovery where I realized, wow, life can be great. I feel good. I can be happy. But then I would relapse again, and it's a vicious cycle. I'd just get worse, and things, get lower.
Right.
And I had a pretty long time in my life where I couldn't picture having a life worth living, and I didn't want to live anymore. And I wanted to take my life, and I never actually tried. But I did spend a lot of time with, I had a friend that we did drugs together a lot, and we kind of had tried to come up with different ways that we could take our lives without suffering and, without being painful or anything like that. Thankfully, we never went through with any of that. But I guess the message and the reason that I bring that up is because in that time, so I had been right out of high school, I went into appraisal, and I did appraisals for a few years, even while I was doing drugs, but I was still functioning and, doing drugs at nighttime sort of things. I wasn't too bad yet. But then the recession hit and lost that. I ended up going into recovery, and the best job that I could get at the time was working at Sports Authority, and I was making like $8 an hour. And I got arrested with 2 felonies, which was like the most serious charge that I had. And I was sitting in jail. That was when I was in jail for a few weeks. And I had grand theft and fraud because I was stealing to support my habit. I'm sitting in jail, withdrawing from opiates with nothing to my name, and now I owe $1,000 in restitution, which to me was all the money in the world. Like, I wasn't able to pay my $400 a month rent at the time. I couldn't imagine how I could pay my rent, get out of jail, pay my rent, and pay this restitution. And on top of all of this, the best job I could get before was $8 an hour at Sports Authority. Now I have 2 felonies. And at that point, it was just like, how could I ever possibly have a life worth living? Life's over as I know it. And it's amazing how things can change.
Yeah, man. So Greg, let's talk about that change, okay? Because here's what I love about this country, man. This is why I love the United States of America, right? It truly is. Sure, we have a lot of problems. Okay, great. And every country does. Okay? Every country does. But what an amazing country, man, where we have the opportunity every day to wake up and literally pursue liberty, right? Pursue freedom, pursue liberty, pursue opportunity. And the reason why I use the word liberty and freedom, because opportunity looks different for everybody. And that's one thing that I've learned over the years, right? What may be right for me may not be right for the next person to the left of me. And what may be right for that person to the left of me and their ideal of freedom, liberty, opportunity may be very different from mine. But man, in this country, we literally get to create, right? We have the opportunity to create and pursue what our calling is. And not only that, but to pursue opportunity. And just what an amazing country, right? And sometimes I think we undervalue that. So man, talk to the audience about how you're able to take all these freedoms, okay? And you took your challenges, you married that up with the liberties that we have in this country, man, and then you went after it and you started creating what you have today. Because it's an amazing story, right?
Yeah, it's hard to believe myself. You know, I think back on how drastic my life has changed, and really, I mean, it just came down to getting to the point where I suffered enough and no longer, you know, I basically just, something changed inside of me, and I just don't want that life anymore. And not, you know, I had wanted to change my life for a long time, and I made effort and I tried and I made progress, but I didn't want it bad enough. And eventually I just did. And, so what I got sober.
What made that shift, right? What happened for you to say, you know what, I do want this now and I do want it bad enough? What happened, man?
I don't think there's any one thing, but like I said, that last experience of going to jail and having been homeless, all of that was really painful. And then that wasn't the end, but it was pretty close to it. And the last time I had been shortly, a few months after that, I was trying to get sober, and I had been staying at my mom's house trying to detox, and I chose to use one more time, and I used a little bit too much, and my mom came in and found me lifeless in my bedroom and gave me CPR and saved my life. I think that was like the real wake-up call, where it was like, holy cow, like, man, that was really, you know, the combination of all those things happening in that short period of time was just rock bottom, and I couldn't live like that anymore. So I already knew what I needed to do, which was, you know, just change everything about who I was and about the way I lived life. And so I did it. And I started working hard. I started pouring myself into, you know, my passions, like surfing is a big thing for me. I surf a lot. I'm interested in business and finances. So I worked really hard and saved my money. I created disciplines to try to get ahead. And what I mean by that is I basically saved, you know, up to at sometimes as much as 50% of my income, and would live off of peanut butter jelly sandwiches, and, you know, just lived off of the bare minimum so that I could save as much as possible. I knew I always wanted to invest in real estate. From my appraisal days, I had gotten a taste of it, and I knew that I loved real estate, was passionate about it. I could never picture how I could, but, you know, after working hard, eventually I worked my way to where I had a decent income, and by still living modestly, I was able to save enough for a down payment and bought my first rental property here in Maui, and used that to, like you mentioned, I like to do Section 8 rentals, and I look for people that need help and that are in tough situations. Not so much like I was, but more so people that a lot of them maybe have a disability or had an accident or have some kind of thing be outside of their control, right, where they're unable to provide for themselves. And a lot of landlords don't want to accept Section 8 or work with the HUD program.
And so Greg, why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? Talk a little bit about that, right?
I think two main reasons. From what I've seen, a lot of people just assume that Section 8 tenants are bad tenants that trash your place, which I don't find to be true. I think there's definitely a lot of bad Section 8 tenants, just like there are of any kind of tenants.
Right.
But there's a lot of good ones too. And I've had nothing but good experiences with my Section 8 tenants. In fact, my cash tenants have been the bad ones. Well, actually, that's not true. I do have one. I have one Section 8 tenant right now I'm going to deal with after this that she's been a nightmare. But overall, you're going to have that percentage no matter what you do. And I had the red flags with her. Like when the application process, I never should have rented to her, but she's an old lady that was going to be homeless if she didn't get a place, and I wanted to help her even though I had all the red flags.
So Greg, let's talk about that, man. Let's unpack that a little bit, right? Because inside of what you talked about, you said, hey, I broke some of my own rules. There's some red flags there. I still made this lease and I shouldn't have done that. But you also talked about the fact that, Section 8 tenants, in your experience, there's a lot of stigma behind the program. You've had nothing but, mostly positive experiences. Okay. So talk about what your process is to be able to vet out your best tenants, right? Because you've had a lot of success using this program, especially, man, in the Paradise Isle, Maui, the Garden Isle, right? So talk a little bit about what your process is to be able to, identify someone that you feel comfortable leasing to. Because that's a big deal, right?
Yeah. So the first step is so anytime I post my ads, it's the first line says, do not respond until you've read the full ad, because I write a long ad and I explain a lot about the property. I go into detail, and that just saves everybody time if they read it, because it explains the condition of the unit, what the tenant's responsible for, what I'm responsible. It explains everything in there. And then at the end, there's 7 questions, and it says, do not respond without the answers to these questions. Copy and paste these questions into your email with your answers to be considered. And so that's my first kind of way to weed out and pre-qualify tenants, because although, even though they're Section 8 and a lot of them aren't even paying any rent, the government, the HUD is paying it, they still need to qualify. And so some of those questions are things like, well, first off, the names of all the applicants, the employment situation, gross monthly income of the total household, where they're living now, and what's their reason for moving. It asks, have they had any evictions or felonies? And then I specify that's not a deal breaker, but it is a deal breaker if you lie about it. So, I don't mind if somebody's had an eviction or a felony. Like I said, I have felonies on my record, and that's okay. As long as you're honest, and if I was applying for a property and they asked, I would say, yes, here's my story, and here's why you don't need to worry about that. But I have had people that lied and said no, and then we met in person and gave them one more chance, and they still said no. And then I ran the application, found out, this one particular applicant had just been evicted a couple months previous, and she lied twice about it, so right. She didn't get it accepted. So that's the first process, and then I meet with the tenants at the unit and take it from there.
So Greg, how, Maui is not a cheap place, right? I mean, the real estate there is not inexpensive. Okay. For that matter, it's one of the most expensive areas in the entire country to own in. Okay. So I know you saved up money. You were able to buy this place. How have you been able to acquire additional properties? Are you working with other investors, or what is your, what do you think the key driver is for you being able to build a portfolio on Maui?
Well, yes, I do partner with other investors. I work with Brandon Turner from Bigger Pockets. We flip houses here on Maui and condos. That's one thing. But I would say the main reason really is continuing to work, because I still have my day job and I still save a large chunk of my income. I don't buy a ton of properties. I've been investing for maybe I think 3 years now. It seems a lot longer than that, but yeah, I guess 3 years now, and I've done about 20 deals, and I've acquired seven units personally. So it's not a ton of properties, and they are lower end, entry level. What I did was I found these condos that are priced really low. I bought them right, so I bought them significant market value, and I found would pay rent based on for example, 2-bedroom in Kahului, right? So they don't factor in that the 2-bedroom is at a more affordable complex. You know, if you were comparing a 2-bedroom rental at property A to this other 2-bedroom at property B 5 blocks away, where maybe property B sells for $400,000 and property A sells, they have a general guideline as to how much is acceptable rent in a given market. So right. I found these properties where the values were lower, and I was able to buy them cheaper, do a little bit of rehab, and make them a little bit nicer, and still get a rental income that made sense to produce a high cash-on-cash return, and help these people at the same time. Because these people coming from the homeless shelter, they're more than happy to live in this complex, even if it's not the fanciest one. Right. You know, they're happy to have a roof over their head. So that's kind of how I've done it. Again, it's been by saving and by buying below market values so that I have equity to recycle and keep going.
Awesome, man. Awesome. I really appreciate you sharing that. I think that's great. It just goes to show, right, Greg, that there's always opportunity. And a lot of it is just changing how we think about opportunity, right? Because even when you tell me about this now, I think of Maui, and I think of the prices on Maui, and I would not have thought about condos as a strategy with Section 8, right, as a product type to be able to offer, housing to a market, especially there, man, just because the market is so unique, right? I mean, you drive 2 miles in one direction, totally different market. You go another 2 miles, opposite of that direction, the market changes drastically. In many cases, not, but, depending on where you are on the island, that is the case, right? I mean, it's just very, very different market. But man, I really admire the fact that you were able to dial in this niche, and you were able to figure it out, right? You were able to figure it out. So where are you trying to go from here, Greg? Where's the opportunity for you from here? Where are you trying to move your business? What do you see on the island of Maui? Paradise Island, the Garden Isle, where do you see the opportunity, man, and where are you trying to take your business?
So from here, I'm trying to move away from the condos, not because I think they're great investments, but having 7 of them, I kind of, want to diversify a little bit. So I've been looking for some time now for single families, although the condos seem to keep coming to me. I just bought another one, but I'm looking for single family homes, and I'm looking for, Maui's got a new law where they allow you to have 2 ADUs on a property that has 7,500 square foot lot. So I'm looking for a single family home that has a decent sized lot where I can add 2 ADUs to create 2 more rentals, basically turn that property into a triplex, right. And use that as a way to create cash flow. Because at the high purchase price, if you buy a house for $700,000 and you rent it for $3,000 a month, you're probably not going to cash flow. So yeah, that's kind of my strategy for moving on to the next phase and doing it profitably.
Awesome, man. Hey, so what are those condos going for roughly that you're buying? What is the price point? Just so that we have some context.
So the majority of my rentals are all in one complex, and those values, I think the average sales price today in that complex is about $140,000. So it's definitely very far on the low end for Maui. Right.
No kidding, man. I didn't even realize that was
Pretty
possible.
sure there's no other. There's a couple other complexes where you can buy stuff in the hundreds, but yeah, there's not a whole lot of that. There's a few complexes like in Kahului in town, right, where it's like kind of our city, and there's some complexes that sell from 150 up to 200 around that mark. But there's this one complex in particular that's huge. It has 350 units, so it's really well known for being a good cash flow and cheap priced complex. But that's also changed over. So when the first unit I bought just 3 years ago, the average sales price was $95,000. So I bought my first unit for $70,000. It appraised for $95,000, and it hit right on the mark of what I was looking for in terms of a discount. And then it rented for $1,700, so it produced about $600-700 a month in cash flow after all the HOAs and everything. They've appreciated since then.
Yeah, man. For Maui, that's pretty damn good. That's really, really good. So I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, Greg. We're approaching the end of the show, but man, still have a couple more questions that I want to ask you because I'm kind of fascinated about the fact that you found this little niche in Maui, right? And in this case, it's condos. So you found this niche with condos. Now you're looking to move to ADUs, right? With this new bill that has passed that allows you to build 2 ADUs on roughly I think the minimum is 7,500 square foot lot, right? That's the minimum.
Right.
So
if it's under that, you can have 1 ADU.
If it's under that, you can have 1. But there's some restrictions with that though, right? I mean, isn't there a lot restriction, like a minimum? Yeah. What is it, like 2,000 square feet or?
So the lot size, the 7,500 is the lot size. So the lot needs to be 7,500 square feet in order to have 2 ADUs.
What about just 1?
If it's under 7,500 square feet, then you can have 1 ADU.
But isn't there a minimum though, a minimum lot size for the 1?
Not that I know of, but I'm not really looking for those.
Right.
I'm kind of looking for the bigger lots, and most of the lots are around that size anyway.
Sure. Especially out in the countryside, right? Out in the countryside, you have those opportunities.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. So, Greg, where are you, where do you look for, so your ADU opportunities, right? Sounds like you're likely going to look for maybe some additional partners to be able to scale a little bit. What areas do you like on Maui, man, for those type of opportunities? If you could choose an area to be able to purchase and put an ADU on, or in this case, 2 ADUs, where would that be? What areas do you like?
I like everywhere. I mean, everywhere except Hana. Out there, East Maui is very, very country, small town. It's a long drive to get to, so it's really disconnected. But anywhere other than that, yeah, I'm interested. Kahului, Wailuku, Kihei, Lahaina, Makawao, Pai. I like all of the main markets in Maui. So,
right.
I'm not. I don't discriminate on the market, and I have a rental out there.
So, Greg, what is the biggest challenge, man, that you face, building a real estate business, a real estate rental business in Maui? Because it's a different market, right? Some of those markets very different than the mainland, right? You have different expectations, right? With people there, just a lot of there's some differences. But from your standpoint, what are some of those key differences? What are some of the challenges that you feel you run into there that are unique to maybe Maui versus like San Diego or California, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this would be unique to California, but I think to a lot of other markets where Maui is a high-priced market, first off, right. So that's the first challenge. The other challenge I think we have is that with the high-priced market and a desirable place like Maui, I kind of liken it to the San Francisco Bay Area, where everyone knows their property is worth a lot of money. And so that can be a challenge when you have somebody whose house is really distressed and falling apart, and they know the values in Maui. So they're like, well, I want 700,000 for this house because the house next door sold for 700. And I'm, kind of overcoming that
Sure.
mindset.
Sure.
It can be challenging because you have to explain to them, like, yeah, the house next door sold for 700. So after we put 150,000 into your house, it's going to be worth 700, but right now it's not, and we can't pay that.
Right.
So that's a challenge. And then the other challenge is, because it's such a desirable location, you probably have this in California, that you have all of this money flowing into the market where people from all over the world want to buy property in Maui, and people with a lot more means than most of us, right? Where they're willing to pay all cash and they're willing to pay full market value or even above market value because they just want to own property in Maui. And even if it doesn't even, even if they're getting a 1% return on it, it's somewhere to park money. So that's a big challenge, is dealing with that kind of competition. So yeah, we just have to be creative and look where everybody else is not looking.
Right, of course.
Try to find our own deals.
That's the name of the game. It's called the market. Hey, so what do you love about real estate in Maui? So we talked about what some of the challenges, but what do you really love about doing business in Maui? What's the one or two things that stand out to you?
I would say I love the fact that I personally feel that Maui is a strong market, whereas even if we go through economic challenges and, like right now times are really uncertain, I feel confident in the property values on Maui, especially with the fact that there's not much more land to build on. So the housing we have, that's it, like there's not going to be a whole lot more of it. So if you can get the right deal, I feel pretty good about the long-term investment in property here. And then I also just like that it's a small island and it's not, I never actively invested in other markets, but I could only imagine, just the number of investors that I know on Oahu, which is kind of the big city island of Hawaii, where Honolulu is, they have 1 million people population, and we have about 160,000. The number of investors I know over there's just so many. Now, there's probably also 1 million times more deals, but there's so much competition. Sure. So one of the things I like about Maui is just being a small island, small town, and everything's close. And yeah, I like it that way.
How did you run into the investors, man, in Oahu? Did you guys meet up at like a seminar or some kind of show, or is it just you've been in the market for so long that you guys just run into each other?
Well, one of the ways is by working with Brandon. He's kind of well known, and so he's plugged in with some of the bigger flippers over in Oahu. That's opened the doors and gotten me some relationships with some of the guys like Corey Namoto and some of the guys over in Oahu. And also just, especially during the COVID times, we've been having the Zoom meeting kind of REI Meetups. So that's been a cool way. Like just this morning we had Corey Namoto from Kiko Capital host a coffee talk meetup. So it's our real estate investors meetup, but it's on Zoom, right? So we get to all the guys from all the islands get to kind of get together and network and talk story, even from our own islands.
That's awesome, man. I love that. I think that's really, really cool. So what islands get plugged in? So Maui, Oahu, Kauai as well? Do you get to plug into guys from or investors from Kauai, guys and gals? I got to record again. I'm going to have to edit this.
Sorry about that.
Because we spliced this now about 3 times because I lost connection with you, but they'll do a pretty good job of editing it back together. So talk to me a little bit about, we talked about some of the challenges. You talked about some of the things that you love. So on this REI meetup, are you guys connecting with people from all the islands, or is it just the primary? Oahu, Big Island, Maui, right? Kauai. Do you guys have anyone out in Lanai?
Nah, I don't think there's anybody in Lanai or Molokai.
Right.
I think it's, there's definitely a lot of people over in Oahu. I think there's definitely a few in Big Island. I don't know if anybody from Kauai has been on. There's also people on the mainland, actually. It's kind of a diverse group. But yeah, it's focused around, we mostly talk about Hawaii. The guests are from Hawaii, so.
Well, man, if you run into anything that you think makes a lot of sense, whether apartment building or a nice house, I'm always open to buying on any of the islands, so long as it's in a good location. Buy a home out there for my family. I'm willing to trade something from either San Diego or some of the other assets that we have in other states. And I've done that successfully a couple times, and it's worked out for a lot of different, for a couple of people, right? They want the income. I just want the vacation property because my kids they're not young anymore, but still have a lot of time to enjoy, and ideally I can pass those assets on. So I'm always open to that, man. I'm always open to it.
Yeah, I'll have to add you to my buyers list. I do some wholesaling too, so.
Do it. I love it. Well, Greg, you've been a great guest, man. And to me, this is a fascinating story. I always love speaking with people that have made a decision to make a change, right? And pursue what their talents are. And, considering some of the challenges that you've been through, man, and how you've turned your life around. And now, you've made a choice to pursue a life of abundance, right? And you're building a great business out there on a really beautiful island, which is the island of Maui, man. I just want to congratulate you, man. I think there's a lot more success headed your way. Just keep moving in the direction that you're heading now, irrespective of the challenges, right? But you've been able to take challenge and convert it into an opportunity. And so you'll always have that under your belt. I think that's something that we learn. We're not born with that, right? We got to build that. We build those disciplines. But you've been a tremendous guest, man, and I wish you continued success. Greg, how do people get in touch with you if they want to learn a little bit more about investing in Maui and talking about Maui real estate?
Yeah, so a couple ways. If you're interested in buying something on Maui, or investor, want to buy something off market and interested in a wholesale deal, you can email me. My email is just Greg at MauiHomebuyers.com. So it's GREG at Maui, MAUI, homebuyers, plural.com. Or you can just follow us on Instagram at Maui Homebuyers, or my personal Instagram, which is at investor.greg.
Beautiful. Greg, thank you so much. And I wish you continued success, man. Keep crushing it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Clarity of purpose creates our greatest competitive advantage. When we transform apartment buildings to thriving communities, we improve how people live and create assets with high profit margins. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this up with a friend. I'm John Brackett, bringing you things you can implement right away.